Hi and welcome to this Fusion 360 tutorial. Today we're going to look at joints in Fusion 360. So we're going to start with looking at components and the first type of joint, which is rigid, which is the easiest one, and then we'll progress on to the other types of joints. If you'd like a copy of this final model to use for demonstration, or learn about joints, please check the link in the description below. So if we jump into Fusion, so what we're going to look at now are the different types of joints you can construct or create in Fusion. So you'll find this under Assemble, and you'll see the second drop down or second option is Joint. So if we zoom in, we're going to have a look at these individual joints that we can create, and there's a number of them in Fusion. So what we've got in the first one is a ball joint. So this acts, hence the name, like a socket and ball, and that allows that part to interact, as you can see on screen. And I'm going to go through how to create each one of these in a minute, but I thought it'd be good to have a look at how they interact first. Second one, a planar. So that basically allows two components to interact, by basically, as you go see in a minute, like a sliding motion along two surfaces, but it does allow that to move, in any sort of direction, along two surfaces or two planes. Next one, pin and slot. So you have your pin, and you have your slot, and again, that's how that interacts. And as you see, as I'm rotating that, that pin is interacting with the slot. Next one is cylindrical, and what we've got here is basically two cylinders, and that will basically allow this to move up and down. As you can see, I could rotate that pin. If I zoom in a bit more down the bottom, that will move in and out of here in a cylindrical motion. Next one, which is an interesting one, is the slider. So we've got this block, and it's going to slide up and down between these two sort of sections at the end, and you can see here that allows it to slide up and down like that, backwards and forwards. Next one we're going to have a look at is the Revolute or the revolutions. So what it's looking at, it's got a hole here and a hole on the other side, and this will, as you can see, sort of rotate between those 2 points. And what I've added here are limits, and we'll go through that later on. So this can't go past that particular point, and same, this can't go past that point. So they actually interact, and basically come in contact with each other, as it would do, if it was a real, assembly of parts. And then the last one is what's called a rigid. So this is basically fixed in place, it has no movement, hence the name. So what we're going to do is just going to click on revert, and you'll see all those pop back to the original positions. So the first thing that you really need to do, is download this model. And then what you'll find is when you download the model, it'll look a bit like this. So all these components, are floating around above. And what we're going to do, we're going to go through each one and apply the joints, and then after that we'll have a look at setting the limits and so on. The first thing that we need to understand to create an assembly in Fusion is that we need to create components. When you're creating designs and you're creating extrudes, and any different features, sometimes it will give you the option of sort of adding, cutting and so on, and in that option, you will find that you can create a component. But sometimes if you ignore that and you get to this point here, we do not have any components, so this is not a component. So the key thing is when you've created a part, is turn it into a component. So if you go under bodies and right click, you can then go create components, and what that will do is the bodies will disappear, and now it is a component. And now if we then add that to other components, we can then create joints and therefore create an assembly. So once you're ready to create your joints, what we're going to do is going to come over to our skill stick, and you can see here all these components in green have been joined together to the components in red to create these individual sort of sets. So we're going to come into here and you can see they're exploded. So yours will look like this. They are not joined together. If you click on this little arrow here, it will open all this information, as you can see. And what I've done is I've created sets of components with similar names, and you can see that the ones in red are grounded, so they would not move. And that's important to have at least one grounded component in your assembly. So that's fixed in place, it will not move, and everything else is jointed to that, or joined together. So we're going to start off by looking at a simple rigid, and we're going to work our way along until we get to the ball joint. So we're going to hold Control and select these two components here as highlighted on screen, and then I'm going to right click and click Isolate. So that's a really good technique to use if once you start building up, or if you have a very complex assembly with lots and lots of components, is to isolate groups of them to work on in one go. Then you can unisolate it, and then you'll see the rest of the assembly. So we've isolated those. I'm going to create a joint. So there's two different ways of doing this. Lots of people tend to click on joint and then select the edges or faces to join, and some people like myself, and I like to do this, is actually select the edges first using Control, then press J, and as you can see that component has now moved into place. I prefer to do it that way. It's up to you. You could either go assemble joint, select those edges or faces, or select them first and then join it. It's up to you. And the first box you will see here, it just gives you the titles of the components that you're joining together, and it's also highlighting whether you're doing a simple type of joint, so using basically what I've selected, or you can create a joint between faces, and between edges as well. The other thing you've got is joint alignment. You may, depending on what you're going to join, you may want to change some of these values. So for example, if I wanted this nut to be further up, you can see I could give it an offset in the Z of 5mm, and that could be further up. If I wanted it for some reason to be offset over here somewhere, then you could do that. But in this instance, I want this to be at the base, no offset whatsoever, and then that's fine. The other thing you could do, say if I did an offset there, you then got flip, you can flip the direction, as you can see on there. So I'm just going to set that to 0. And in motion, it's selected this basic rigid. I'm going to go for each one of these as we go along this skill stick. And if you click play, it gives you a preview, of what that joint, or how it interacts with the other component. And you need to click on stop it. Sometimes that can get a little bit annoying, especially when you start using some of these other ones. So I'm going to click OK. So once you've created your first joint, we're going to work along and create the other joints. But before we do that, every joint that you create is down the bottom here. And also, as you can see highlighted, it's under the folder called joints. They can be renamed, they can be deleted, suppressed if you want to basically use them later, but it's not going to affect the two components. Or you can go and edit, and we can edit that, and we can change some of the options if we need to change that. So that's the first thing, to edit it. Right, we're going to come along and we're going to have a look at the Revolution one next. So we're going to select these two here again. I'm going to go and isolate. So that's the first one done. I'm going to zoom in and out. I'm going to select these two using Control and click on Isolate. So again, you've got options. You can go into Assembly, Joint, then click the faces or edges, or you can select the faces or edges and then click Joint. So I like to do this way. And on this particular one, I could select that edge. Spin it around and select that edge. And I can also do the insides of those as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two edges, like so. Then press J. And then we need to go into type of motion. At the moment it's rigid, so that will not move at all. So we want to go in revolution, like so, and click OK. And that will now rotate, okay, in position. Now it's not going to go through at the moment because I've got something what's called contacts, okay, turned on. So that's not going to go right through that part there. And if I click on that, I can go revert to position. If you made a mistake and you selected the wrong axis, or you wanted to change something, okay, under motion, under Revolute, you've got these options here. So you can press X, so if you wanted it to interact that way, Y, if you want it to interact that way, and of course Z is how I want it to interact, like so. And the play just gives you that option to see how it interacts. Custom, okay, will allow you to select other axes, okay, by selecting edges, okay, as well as the insides of faces, like on the inside of a cylinder or a hole. But we want to keep it quite simple and Z, and click OK. So the next one we're going to look at is slider. So I'm just going to highlight these and isolate them. And select the slider ones by using Control and then right click and select isolate. So what we're going to do is this time, rather than using edges, I'm going to use these two faces. I'm going to click J for joint. And as you can see, okay, it has selected the slider. And then, now position wise, all I'm going to do is, first of all, is select that and just move that along so it's not intersecting. So this is where you can change your alignments. Okay, later we will tell it, okay, a certain limit so it's not going to go through here as well, but I'm just going to move that, say, up 5mm. Just going to go into motion just to check it's correct. There you go. So I haven't selected the wrong axis, for example. So there you go. So I just need to make sure I click on the Z. If you wanted a certain custom one, again, you can click custom and select edges, okay, or face for that to move along, especially if you add like a certain angle going off over here somewhere. So Z is what I want. Okay, and I'm going to click OK. And then what I can do here is I can grab this and I can move that up and down just to test it out as well. Then what will happen is this will come up here. Do you want to capture that position, which means I want it to stay there, and a little symbol will appear down here, or I'm just going to click on revert just to go back to the beginning. Okay, so we're going to hide the slider, so I'm going to select those two components there using Control, right click and click on isolate. So you can see we've done the first three. What we're going to look at next, if I can actually zoom in and zoom out, would be good, and pan that along, is we're going to look at these two here, cylindrical. So I'm going to right click on those. Okay, one selected and isolate. So what we've got here is we want these two to interact like basically, as you'll see in a second, from a cylindrical point of view. Got this little pin on here, so we can use that. Okay, especially when we look at contacts, and we can use that so it'll actually interact and spin around this sort of groove here as well. Okay, otherwise at the moment, if we don't have contacts, and what you'll probably find in your model is when I move that up and down, that pin will just probably go through the body. Okay, but if we click okay these surfaces this time, or I could do okay the edges there, I could do this edge here and the edge at the bottom. Okay, it's up to you how you want to select them. I'm just going to do these two here, press J, and that's going to give me a bit of a preview. And at the moment it's got preview as slider. So slider could be, if you think about it, could be how you would want it to interact on that one, just because of the shape. However, I want to add the cylindrical ones like so. And again, you've got previews, so we can go X. Okay, so that's showing it moving in that axis. Y, moving in that axis. And then we've got Z moving in the axis, which I would want it to do. And the same again, you have custom if you wanted a custom option. And then position wise again, if you wanted it to start at a certain offset position, okay, you could put an offset in these if you wanted to. I'm just going to go 0 and I'm going to click OK. And then if we just grab this green one, you'll see here how that now is sliding up and down and between that point. Okay, and again, I mean, you could grab that and it will stay in that position. Okay, slide in between there, and you could drag it and drag it. Okay, all the way up here as so. I'm just going to click revert. There you go. So that one was quite simple as well. And again, if you need to change anything, right click and edit that or delete it, and you can start that one again. So the next one we're going to have a look at is I'm going to hide these two. Okay, unisolate those, should I say, and then we're going to have a look at the pin and slot. So select those and isolate them. And what I'm going to choose this time is I'm going to go for edges. And what we want is this pin here to interact with the slot. So I'm going to click that edge there, and I'm going to click on that edge there. Click J. Okay, and as you can see, that's sort of interacting at the moment like that. However, that's interacting in terms of a cylindrical. What we want is a pin and slot, like so. So as you can see. Now you can change these, so how you want that to interact, depending on the axis you're looking at. Okay, and also you can change how you'd like it to slide as well. So we're going to keep that to that direction on the x-axis, and we're going to go not x, not y, okay, z again, to give us a bit of a preview of what's going to happen. Okay, like that. So again, you've got to decide on which axis, work out which axis are going to work together. Positioning wise, again, if you wanted it to start off at a certain position, okay, then you can change that. As you can see, I'm doing that on the X now. Okay, or for some reason, if you wanted it to set off here, okay, then you can add all these in, but we want it to interact as I have selected. And you've obviously got the option of flip as well. I'm going to click OK. And then what I've got now, if I zoom out, okay, is this will interact now, okay, like a pin and slot. And if we turn this around, you get a decent angle. Okay, again, you see this, so this will move, okay, this sort of arm here, and it will move up and down that slot, okay, which is quite cool. And again, you can either capture that position if you want it, or I'll just revert it to that one. So that's the pin and slot done. So what we're going to do now is just going to hide this pin and slot. So right click and isolate that. And we're going to look at the planar this time. So again, select those using control, right click and isolate, so we can work on these. So this is the easiest one to understand, I think, apart from maybe rigid. And what we're going to do here is use that plane there, select that, select this plane here, and click J, and click OK. So at the moment, it might be interacting, okay, but that's interacting more like a pin and slot, so it's going to move in a certain direction depending on what's set. Click on cylindrical, that's not quite what we want, okay. Same with slider. Revolution, it's a bit difficult to see, but it is spinning around, it looks like it's vibrating around there. And then we've got rigid, we don't want it to be rigid, so we want to use planar. And then that gives us different options. So again, so we've got Z selected, we could do X planar, we could do Y planar, Z is what we want, and then again you've got custom if you want to. And then the actual, so that's what it's normal to. Those two, what it's normal to, those two faces I've selected. And then slide, okay, we've got the X, and again you can use custom. And then of course you can click play to look how it's going to interact. If we click OK, what this one will allow us to do is that allows us to spin and move that around, okay, on, okay, those two surfaces. So if you imagine, okay, it's a bit like one of those ice hockey puck games. Okay, this is the puck, that's the table, and it slides along that surface. Okay, and because I've got something called contacts on, which we'll look at later, it actually hits these here. Okay, so it actually interacts with it, and we'll look at that shortly. So that's that one done. And the last one we're going to look at, which I think is a really interesting one, if we just isolate those. So you can see how we progressed and looked at all these, is the ball joint. So if we select those two, okay, and right click and isolate, so we can just work on these two here. This is quite simple. Here you can see there's sort of a half spherical sort of dome, okay, inverted, so that's got a concave shape there. And we've got this, okay, sort of ball here with a hole going through it. And the reason there's a hole going through it is so you can easily see this rotating, okay, and changing angles. Whereas if it was just a solid ball, sometimes it can be difficult to see that. So if we select these two surfaces here and click J, it's going to remember the last type of motion I selected, which is planar, which is not correct. I could do a rigid, but then the issue is with rigid, it is not going to move at all. So if I right click and edit that, okay, could do revolution, but then it will always spin in sort of one axis depending on the axis you've chosen, and then we same cylindrical and so on depending on what you've selected. So we're going to go ball, and as you can see, it gives you a preview. You can sort of spin 360 basically. You can change, okay, the pitch, okay, and the yaws as it suggests here if you wanted to. It's already selecting, okay, the right axis, and again you can come up with a custom one, and as you can see, that's sort of interacting and spinning around like a ball, okay, joint. And then we click OK to save that. So if we come out to that now and isolate and just hide this, okay, we're very quickly gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay, different types, okay, of joints in Fusion. Thanks for watching, and if you found this content helpful, please click like and subscribe, and also check out any other resources and videos created using the links in the description. I'll see you on the next one.